Joining us, former director of ICE under President Obama, Sarah Saldana, and former ICE chief of staff and former Department of Homeland Security official Jason Hauser. Jason, I'll begin with you. Do those numbers make sense to you, those results?
The scale of the number of complaints seem, quite frankly, it meets what I believe has been the misuse of force and the inability for ICE to carry out these large-scale mass quota arrest operations and still conform to the use of force policy, which is still in place. The overall, and additionally, when ICE looks into these cases, the review is done both within the agency level, the department, and is supposed to occur from an independent lens. I have a lot of concerns that that is not occurring currently, and the resources that go into those sort of investigations have been pulled back. So there's a lot of questions there that are left for me.
And I imagine the 21 still under investigation is doing a lot of work in terms of some of the more outrageous and outstanding questions regarding officer behavior, be it the killings in Minneapolis or the ones we just have experienced the past couple weeks in Maine and in Texas. Part of the issue that I wonder about, Sarah, is that especially with the last two incidents, the officers were not wearing body cams. We keep hearing lip service from ICE officials about the need for body cams. They have more money than even some armies around the world. What's taking so long with these body cams? Is it really something that's hard to put into place?
Not really. This is really sounds like an excuse with respect to the time it takes. If there's a need, if there's a great need, this can be done very quickly. Ask any police department how difficult it is to get your hands on body cams and get people using them. Quite frankly, this is way overdue. I think we had the first promise from Tom Homan back in February that there would be changes made. Today, I read that perhaps he's saying, oh, we can do that in a few days. That could have been done in a few days, I think, back in February or March. Those need to be done. They really need to be done for the sake of the agency as well as for the general citizenry there in the various states that ICE is in.
Benny Thompson said he was told 60 days. That's how long it would take body cams to be put into place. But you do bring up a good point, Sarah, which is that this was a promise that was made back in February after Minneapolis, after all of that outrage regarding two American citizens getting killed and the way ICE officers were behaving on camera and CBP officers were behaving on camera out there toward protesters. So do you believe them when they say 60 days, or is this just them kicking the can down the road?
Katie, this is one of the consequences of not having candor and transparency with respect to what the agency is doing. It is so important, to sound like a broken record, to have community support in any law enforcement activity, ICE, local police, sheriff, anybody. But this administration, the heads of ICE, the heads of Homeland Security that we've seen in the last few months have done more damage to the credibility of the agency than they seem to understand or appreciate. And once you do that damage to credibility, you start questioning everything, including that it takes 60 days to get your hands on cameras. If the president were to tell Tom Homan, get those cameras yesterday, I truly believe that Tom Homan would get those cameras yesterday. They seem to be able to do things like that very quickly upon the president's directive. So I would urge them to bring this up to the top and get it done.
Jason, do you agree?
Katie, I have some pretty specific insight in this. Let me just say that the body-worn camera work plan, the working plan and implementation plan was actually begun in 2022 and 2023. There was appropriation requests back to those same fiscal years in the upwards of $20 to $25 million that Congress wanted to provide. The initial acting director of ICE at the beginning of this Trump administration was in charge under our leadership within the Biden administration to develop that plan. So this idea that Tom is coming out now and saying that there's they're developing a plan and this takes time is just it's all fake. That is not aligned to reality. And most notably, you can look at how quickly Border Patrol and CBP have deployed body-worn cameras. So this does not take a lot of time. It quite frankly does not take a lot of money comparatively to what ICE has been given. It does provide the force protection, and it also creates accountability. But additionally, what it's going to show us when the cameras are finally put on is going to be the second decision making that officers are being put in these very complex situations operationally, because they're being driven to move towards these mass quotas, mass arrests, and hitting these detention goals of putting people into custody.
I wonder what you make of what happened with the Secretary, Markwayne Mullin. He said in the aftermath of Maine and Texas that they would put a pause on the ICE vehicle stops. The president overturned that pretty quickly. Who's in charge at DHS? And is it a problem if the two of them are not on the same page?
From my perspective, of course, it's definitely a problem. But I mean, what we're seeing again is the sort of use of these car stops was never really in the broad general operational use by deportation officers. There was never sort of a use of car stops policy or handbook or best practices on the, mainly they were used in fugitive operations in other scenarios by deportation officers. So the idea that they're pushing the operational, going to the sort of the edge of capability, while at the same time they're taking away, they're collapsing training of officers, both at the schoolhouse and recurring training in the field. They're putting these officers in life-threatening situations needlessly just to hit arrest quotas of now we're seeing them, the vast majority of are non-criminals and those that are being taken out of legal status over the last few months. So we have to ask ourselves, what are we getting and what are we doing to both the officers, putting them in these situations which they're not trained for, but also then the sort of the severe harm that our communities are being placed in by these risky stops.
People are dying. People who are not even the target of the ICE operation are dying. The man who they killed in Maine was here legally, according to the family, was able to work here legally. He was shot and killed while he was driving away, and it's reported his 3-year-old daughter saw him lying on the ground dead after that. I mean, that is just, there's no world where that should be acceptable, and no world where there should not be a full investigation with real transparency so the public knows exactly how it happened and how it won't happen again.